We'll get there now. Okay, so welcome to BCP's Planning Committee for the Eastern Region, Thursday, the 5th of June, 2025. If we can first start with housekeeping, please.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly points at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum. Mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off your mics and turning down the volume completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So item 1, apologies, please.
So we've received apologies from Councillor Joe Clements, and item 2, substitute members. There are no substitutes today.
Okay, thanks for confirming. So I'm Councillor Paul Hilliard, so I'm the chair of the committee. I'll just go round for others to introduce themselves.
Other side. Did it right one day. My name is Councillor Marion Lepedvin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward, and I'm Vice Chair of the committee.
I'm Joe Salmon. I'm Councillor for Moordown Ward.
Councillor Felicity Race in Oakdale Ward.
Councillor Julian Martin, Boscombe West.
Matt of Talbot Woods Ward.
Lawrence Williams, Councillor for Littledown and Iford.
Councillor David Flagg, Burton Grange Ward.
Toby Slade, Muscliffe and Stratton Park.
Peter Waters, Senior Planning Officer.
Simon Gould, Development Management Manager.
Thank you. So in the room also is Jill Hollyoak, Democratic Services Officer, and joining later for one of the planning applications will be Piotr Kulik, Planning Officer. Okay, so item number 3, are there any declarations of interest from members? None. If there any does come up as we go through, then please highlight that. Number 4, confirmation of the minutes of the 8th of May. We've had those for a while. Any points to raise, or everyone happy with those?
Happy.
In agreement, so I shall sign those. Item 5 is public issues. So after the officer presentations, we will hear any public speakers, followed by any ward councillors. And moving to the schedule of planning applications, Schedule 6. The first application today is 25 River Way. So Mr. Waters, please.
Thank you, Chair. Lovely. Good morning, members. I'm here today to present an application for retrospective planning permission for a change of use from a C3 residential garage to mixed-use space, and a mixed-use space would include uses as a pole and pole and aerial fitness exercise studio, as well as continuing personal use by the applicant for activities that are ancillary to the residential use. And our address is 25 River Way in Christchurch, BH23 2QQ. So as always, just a little bit of context of the site. We're in the site is on River Way, but as you can see from the location, the location plan, we back onto Herne Way as well. So it's not quite the corner plot, but it does have a relationship to neighbouring properties on both River Way and Herne Way. I've got a few photographs to run you through. So photographs of the site, you'll note that although the parent planning permission was to erect a garage, since that time the applicant has used their permitted development rights to replace the garage doors with patio doors, which they are entitled to do under permitted development allowances. So you can see this is the front of the building and the entrance to it. You can see the relationship. Number 2 Herne Way is just there, and this is looking to the side of the building. This is to the front of the site, so there's hard surfacing that the applicant has put down Again, they have permitted development rights to do so, and they have set it out in a way that it can be used for personal use, but also doubles up as parking provision for the business when it's operating. And also I've got an internal photo view of the studio as well. As you can see, it's a straightforward fitness studio, no significant means of amplification there. A little bit more context then. So this photograph here is looking out towards Riverway. Again, looking back towards this hard surface at the front, which serves the dual purpose. And then I'm afraid this is a Google Street image, as it's betrayed by the fact of what happened before the change, but this is the access onto the street. Sorry, from the street into the site. The access point itself hasn't changed. You've got a dropped curb. Obviously, this is now tarmac. And then again, a couple that I've nicked from Google, just giving some context of Riverway, very representative of what I saw when I visited the site. It's a residential street. It's is used as an occasional bus route, but largely is a fairly quiet route. So the proposal then is for the retrospective change of use of the existing garage to the mixed use space. No physical alterations are proposed as part of this, as I've set out. The applicant has used their permitted development rights in order to make the physical changes that you can already see. So we're considering today the impact of the proposed change of use. That being said, I have got some elevations and floor plans for you, which show no change ultimately. You've got the existing floor plan, got an open space. There is a small toilet at the back, which is used dually for clients, but also for family members if they're out there. Other than that, you've got an open space, and the elevations just reflect what you've seen in the photographs. The side elevation there is the one that backs onto Hemway. There's no windows in it, and equally the rear elevation is also windowless. And those are the two elevations that are closest to neighbouring properties. So, excuse me a second. So one of the main considerations for this application is the impact on the amenity of neighbouring residents of having this change of use. As I mentioned, the boundary is very close to the building is very close to the boundary of 2 Hernway. It's approximately 2 metres. This is the building in case there's any, in order for clarity. So as you can see, it's very close to the boundary of 2 Hernway there. And officers have undertaken an assessment in regard to whether the proposed change of use would have an harmful impact on the effective immunity of neighbours. Officers consider that there is the risk with the type of use as a fitness studio that amplified music could have an impact, especially given the proximity of the structure to the neighbouring properties. Officers are less concerned regarding the noise impact. Sorry, officers are concerned to a degree about clients leaving premises likely to have some degree of impact, but not significant. So that's in terms of turnover, people talking to each other and what have you. In order to address that, officers have worked with the environmental health team, who've made the following suggestions in terms of planning conditions, which officers are proposing to take forward if members are minded to approve the application. And the first is to restrict amplified music to not being played during business operation. I should say we're not requiring that for personal occupation, because that would be overstepping what this application is applying to do. And environmental health statutory noise nuisance still exists. So if you're having a party and you're making too much noise or regularly doing that, you're bound by the same legislation that we all are in terms of having a respectful relationship with our neighbours. So because the application is relating to the change of use to the business operation, the condition is being restricted to the impact of the business operation. And the second proposed condition relates to the opening hours of the business. So it would open no later than 9 PM on weekdays, with an opening time of 9 AM, and only be open in the mornings on weekends, so 9 to 12. And so officers consider, along with their environmental health colleagues, that those two conditions would be sufficient to protect the immunity of the neighbours, so you don't have lessons going on late into the night and you don't have loud music being played. Car parking is another significant consideration for this application. I've reused some of these photographs just to emphasise that they are proposing to use, and I have been using this space for car parking. So there's a car parking plan here that's provided that shows 5 visitor spaces, and then these 2 here. I don't know how clear that is, but that's for the residents themselves for their own parking. Our highways team have advised that there's plenty of on-street parking as well. I've visited the site a couple of times and I have always parked on street and never noticed any issues myself, and that is corroborated by our highways colleagues. In terms of other matters, taking into account the impact on the character and appearance of the area, we're looking at a change of use, not physical alterations. So in terms of the impact on the character and appearance area visually, officers are satisfied. There will be a certain impact on the character by introducing a business, but it's the officer's opinion that with the conditions restricting the hours of operation of the business and the amplified music, that change to the character won't be unduly harmful to the overall character of the area. I have to mention biodiversity and biodiversity net gain, as is the case of all applications these days. We're dealing with a change of use, so biodiversity net gain does not apply here. And again, heathlands and phosphates, and I probably should have added to that presentation, is just coming into focus, impact on the New Forest as well. That all relates to whether there's an increase in residential accommodation having an impact on protected sites. This proposal doesn't involve an increase in residential accommodation, and therefore there is no impact on these protected sites. So in conclusion, officers accept the proposal has the potential to have an impact on the immunity of neighbouring residents. However, it's our officers' consideration and recommendation that with the proposed planning conditions, the immunity of the residents would be suitably protected, and the parking provision is also considered to be sufficient. And so therefore, in line with that, officers recommend that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waters, for the presentation. If we can now go to speakers, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the first speaker is Rita Rayner, who is speaking in objection, if you'd like to come forward.
Ready to start, thank you. Good morning. I've been asked to speak today on behalf of local residents. The planning officer's report indicates that 29 letters of representation have been received, and then 21 of these are supportive of the application. However, we would like the committee to note that only 9 of those letters are being received from neighbours living within half a kilometre of the property, and these are the people most likely to be impacted. Of these 9 letters, 8 are objections and only 1 is in support. This gives a better indication of the degree of support from the development from people living in the immediate neighbourhood. The letters of support are from individuals identified as neighbours who live up to 21 kilometres away. Representation from people who don't live in the locality should probably be discounted in relation to planning proposal, as the location of the business has no impact on them outside of attending lessons. The letters of support focus on the benefits of exercise and the competence of the tutor. These points are not in dispute and they are valid, however, not really relevant whether support for or objection to a respective planning application for a business premises. Given the distance travelled by most people to attend the lessons, it is reasonable to assume that they will continue to attend if the lessons took place at suitable business premises in the area. In addition, 5 of those in support indicated that they've attended lessons when held at the previous location, so refusal of planning permission would have no negative impact, as presumably they would continue to attend if lessons were held at an alternative premises. The first objection to granting planning consent related to parking and additional traffic disturbance, KS 12. The planning officer has noted that parking on the premises has been provided for up to 5 customer vehicles. However, up to 8 customers may attend each class. Whilst lessons are currently limited in number, there is nothing in the planning officer's proposal condition to prevent the business expanding, having lessons running hourly between 9 AM and 9 PM on weekdays, using additional tutors, for example. This would have a significant detrimental effect and is not an unreasonable future scenario as per the National Planning Policy Framework. The planning officer has noted that traffic disruption, vehicle parking and additional vehicle noise will be limited to customers arriving and leaving lesson, so is compliant with local plan policy HE2. However, if planning permission is granted, there may be up to 8 vehicles frequently parked at and around the premises, arriving and leaving every hour. The current application gives scope for 66 hours of lessons a week. That's 12 hours a day, times 5, plus 6 hours at weekends. When considering attendance by a permitted 8 people at each lesson, then the current proposal allows for 528 customers every week, 52 weeks a year. This would have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area, and so not HE2 compliant. And as above, there's nothing in the planning officer's proposed conditions to prevent it. It is acknowledged that customers have a legal right to park on the road, but this does not exempt the business from being considerate to neighbours. One of the key issues for consideration identified by the planning officer is whether the use is compatible with other uses in the area. As it is in a residential area, with no other business use, it is clearly incompatible. Also, although weekend hours are restricted, a commercial business running 7 days a week in a residential area is excessive. The proposed condition relating to amplified music has been noted. In recent weeks, neighbours have noticed that there has been less noise from the premises. If the application is approved and the applicants are permitting to run a business, we would ask that additional conditions are attached to restrict the following: the number of sessions that can take place each day, the number of customers that can attend each session, the number of days each week that the business can operate, and that the business use is for an aerial fitness exercise studio with no other business use permitted. This should prevent what is essentially a lifestyle business from becoming a full-time commercial operation in the midst of a quiet residential area. Thank you.
Okay, and the next speaker is the applicant, Mrs. Saunders, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you for giving me the time to speak to you today in support for the change of use at 25 Riverway to an aerial fitness and instructional exercise studio, which also includes personal use. The proposal represents a modest and sustainable new use of an existing building for the community-orientated health-promoting activity, as well as for my family's enjoyment. The development accords with national and local planning policies supporting healthy lifestyles, appropriate small-scale enterprise, and making efficient use of land and existing structures. The proposal aligns with the National Planning Policy Framework, which encourages flexible uses of land and buildings to support local services and community well-being. The garage space, not used to its full capacity and ideal for low-impact repurposing. The new promotes public health, female fitness and well-being through structured, supervised activity, and also provides a good space to allow family time and activities. The proposal supports micro-businesses development, especially for me as an independent instructor. The use is low intensity with small class sizes, limited hours and minimal traffic generation. It enhances community resilience by offering a local wellness activity that complements residential living. The scale and nature of the use remain entirely domestic in appearance and scale. The existing garage footprint and external evaluations remain unchanged. There is no increase in built form or impact on the street scene. This is a low-key home-based business. Sessions are conducted indoors with acoustic insulation measures, ensuring no audible noise escapes the property. The limited hours, small group sizes, and appointment-based format mean negotiable comings and goings compared to general residential activity. The site has dedicated off-street parking significant for attendees, with bookings ensuring no off-site parking is required and therefore the impact is minimal. The use is fully contained within an existing garage and does not alter the external appearance of the property. The residential use of the property remains dominant. The proposed change of use from a domestic garage to an aerial fitness studio is a sustainable, small-scale community health initiative. It complies with both national and local planning policies, preserves residential character, does not negatively impact neighbour amenity, and brings public health benefits, particularly for women's health fitness. The application is supported by the dedicated case officer, Peter Walters, with no objections from Highways or the environmental team. We respectfully request that the committee supports this application and recognises the positive contribution such a small-scale, well-managed faculty can make to the local area. Thank you for your time.
And finally, we have online Councillor Margaret Phipps, the ward councillor, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. Paragraph 2 gives of the report gives details of a previous grant for the garage, the so-called garage, for purposes incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling, but for no other purposes whatsoever. But I did note that that grant made no mention of its use for a car. So I do consider the wording of that original grant to be quite weak, which has allowed to happen what you see before you today. The application is, as you know, retrospective, and some residents are suggesting that the larger garage was never intended for cars and it was actually always for this business. Paragraph 3, we're told partial use is the buyer's business and partial is family use. But this is a 7-day-a-week business operation, so clearly, overwhelmingly, it is being used at the moment for the unauthorised business, which commenced as soon as the enlarged garage permission was granted. But the key issue is at paragraph 10 as to whether this use is compatible with other uses in the area. And I would suggest it is absolutely not, as paragraph 4 states that there are no other commercial premises in the area anywhere near the application site. This is an absolutely completely residential area. The suggested grant at paragraph 37 offers condition 4, allowing Monday to Friday opening 9 a.m. to 9 p.m, that's 12 hours a day, and Saturday and Sunday mornings 9 till 12. I and the resident who has spoken agree that totals 66 hours a week over every single day of the week, with no respite on weekday evenings, weekends, or bank holidays. These are not what I would call limited hours. You've already also heard from the resident speaker that the planning statement says that on weekdays, each class can accommodate up to 8 people. Well, doing the maths, there's the potential, if this application is granted, with what I consider to be a very weak proposed condition 4, to allow 528 people per week to use this business. Or perhaps more, as there's no suggestion of a cap on the number of people per session. With 1 occupant per car, 8 people per 1 hour session over a 12-hour day, the actual potential is 96 cars per day on weekdays and another 48 Saturday and Sunday. That's the potential of what you would be granting, a total of 528 cars a week to a residential address. Then there's the entry and exit footfall in this wholly residential area, which I believe would be unacceptable and contrary to policy HE2. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear, this is the reality of this application and what you could actually be granting if you do it as it stands at the moment. There's no mention either of no use on bank holidays, which leaves it wide open for use 365 days of the year. To be clear, I don't think this is just working from home. This is a full-scale commercial business in a residential area. And I personally believe it would be better suited to a commercial venue and not a building which was in good faith granted as a garage by this council. Furthermore, there is the possibility once granted, the mixed use applied for could change to something else. So I suggest if you do consider granting it, it should be specific to a pole aerial fitness exercise studio and no other business use. Nearby residents would like to see this application refused on the basis its use is not compatible with other uses in the area and it's contrary to policy HE2 due to the excessive potential traffic and footfall. However, if you are minded to grant, then I think it's absolutely essential that the impact to nearby residents is reduced and conditions are added and made watertight, unlike the previous garage grant, which was flouted. And I don't think the conditions suggested are sufficient to protect the amenity. If you really feel you should grant, I ask the committee to consider changing or adding the following conditions. A change to condition 4 to the maximum opening hours shall be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays with no Saturday, Sunday or bank holiday operation. Add class sizes are restricted to a maximum of 6 people. Add the business use granted is solely for pole aerial fitness exercise studio. No other business use is permitted. And should the business close or the property be sold, then the building will revert to a residential garage for car parking. I'm hoping you will consider refusing the application, but otherwise seriously consider these additional conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. So, Mr. Waters, from what you've heard, can you expand, please, on the KS12 and the HE, your interpretation, and also, obviously, after speaking to the applicant, your understanding of the way since November classes have operated and the footfall and parking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, in terms of KS12, policy KS12 relates to parking provision, and it says that adequate vehicle and cycle parking facilities will be provided by the developer to serve the needs of the proposed development. This application, like many of our applications, was sent to the Local Highways Authority for their expertise on this, and they are comfortable that the parking provision that's already available in combination with the capacity on the street would be sufficient to meet the needs of the business. And so I've taken their recommendations into consideration when considering the application. HE2, in terms of impact on the character of the area, it's let me read it to you, bear with me. Let's have it on the screen. So, design a new development. Oh, thank you. So, new development it says, to achieve this, development will be permitted if it is compatible or improves its surroundings with layout, site coverage, architectural style, scale, bulk, height, materials, landscaping, visual impact, relationship to nearby properties, including minimising general disturbance to amenity in relationship to mature trees. Now, going through that list, layout isn't changing because there's no physical alterations, likewise site coverage, likewise architectural style, likewise scale, bulk, height, materials, landscaping. Visual impact is an interesting one. It'd be down to members to consider whether there's any visual impact in the increased parking, but clearly that is temporary, so I caution members to think carefully about whether that is a visual impact that would be harmful, because that will only occur when the business is taking place, and when the business isn't, that will revert back to not being full of cars. It's not a permanent car park. I think the one part of the policy, the relationship to mature trees, I should say there are no mature trees on the site. So the one part of the policy that I think does come into play here, and as I say, officers have made a recommendation on the suitability of this, but this is the relationship to nearby properties, including minimising general disturbance to amenity. So, as I set out in the presentation, the officer's recommendation is that the conditions are sufficient to minimise the disturbance to amenity. Obviously, that's something that members will need to decide, but your officer's recommendation is that that would be the case. In terms of the nature of the business, the discussions that I've had with the applicant relate to it kind of being on a small scale. Anecdotally, she's advised that a lot of her clients actually travel by public transport or walk. Now, I grant you that in terms of considering this planning application, your clients change over time, so that might be the case now, might not always be the case, so you do need to weigh that in the balance. And yeah, at the moment there's a maximum of 8. Looking at the current timetable, there is only one instance where there's one session immediately after another. Again, I accept the points that are being made here, that that's the current situation, and that doesn't preclude that timetable changing. So I hope I've addressed all your points.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. So members, are there any other questions? Councillor Gillett?
Just one quick question to clarify. The application is going from C3 residential to mixed use space. So, and then it goes on to say the proposed use is for a pole aerial fitness studio. But if it's granted the mixed use space, does that mean that, you know, potentially in the future somebody said, well, I'm going to run it for some other purpose, then in effect they would have permission. So just by way of illustration, you know, we've got a clause on there for amplified music, but somebody might be sticking to the hours, but they're using an angle grinder, which might have what is the scope in terms of the mixed use space? Because it does that mean it can only be pole aerial fitness because that's the following sentence, or is it just mixed use space? Thank you.
Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Chair. The application is for the pole and aerial fitness exercise studio, but I take the point that the council is making, and I think one of the things, if members were minded to approve, that maybe we could consider as an additional condition restricting the use specifically, just if that provides a bit more comfort and assurance that we don't end up with a situation that the council has outlined. I think that would meet the MPPF tests of planning conditions.
Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, it's a very valid point that the councillor raises. Just having a quick look at the use classes order, I would suggest that the use as a fitness studio would probably fall within Class E of the use classes order, which deals with commercial, business and service. Class E then breaks down from A to G, covering a range of different uses with it that would be permissible within Class E, such as retail sale of goods, sale of food and drink, finance services, professional services. But then we get to D, that deals with indoor sport, recreation and fitness. So I would suggest that the proposed use is Class ED. So members would be entitled to add a condition, if they were minded to grant, to limit the use specifically to ED, which just deals with what's being proposed, the fitness, and that would remove scope for other uses within Class E to come about should this business wind up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. Any further on that, Councillor Gillett? No. Councillor Rice?
Yes, I was just wanting further information about if this had been installed into a room within the main house, such as the city room, and the city room had been converted. Are there any major differences? Would they have needed to get planning application for that as well?
Waters?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think so, because what we're looking at is there's always a bit of a grey area in terms of when you have an ancillary use. So working from home, for example, wouldn't require planning permission, but in this instance, you're running regular sessions. There's clear business use going on here. You've got clients coming regularly. So your officer's opinion is yes, even if they were using a room within their own house, we would still be suggesting that it would require planning permission.
Thank you.
And with regards to the opening hours that are permitted, is there any expert advice on, there was a suggestion about restricting those. It seems to me that a small business like this would need flexibility to be able to work in the evening. So I was just wondering if there was any advice on the hours that have been recommended and the suggestions that have been put forward.
Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Chair. So the opening hours were put forward by the applicant and considered by the Environmental Health Officer, and they're satisfied that a 9 o'clock finish strikes that balance between, as you say, allowing a business to operate into the evening when some of the clients are likely to work through the day or have childcare responsibilities or what have you. So it would strike that balance between allowing the business to operate into the evening but not allowing it to go on very late into the evening. It's not comparable, but we often say a lot of commercial businesses must close by 11. It's slightly different, but at 9 o'clock was felt by our environmental health team to be a reasonable, reasonable balance between protecting the amenity of neighbouring residents. I'm trying to think, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think environmental health normally consider hours where there should be quiet between about 11 and 6, I think, or 11 and 7. So this kind of sits within, sits within what would they consider to be a reasonable functioning time.
And the weekends and the suggestion about bank holidays.
So as it stands at the moment, the bank holidays would run on the same operating hours as, on whatever day the bank holiday falls. Again, I've been guided by the environmental health officers who didn't see any particular concerns with that taking place, and it has to be kind of seen in conjunction with the lack of amplified music as well. So in theory, the level of disturbance would be clients arriving and leaving, but once they're in the session, you may have seen from the photo there's an air conditioning unit, so they don't even need to open the windows. So they would be in the building and you wouldn't necessarily have any awareness that they're there, which is why the proposed condition for amplified music applies, because clearly that would have a potential impact.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Salmon.
So I might be missing stuff, but we had a few additional conditions from the speaker against and from Councillor Phipps. So one was on the change of use, which I think we've covered off. The other one was on times. Were there any other additional conditions that were requested?
I made a note of those, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Phipps had put forward a revision to the operating hours. I think it was 9 till 5. I might have got that wrong. That's the only one I was a bit unsure on. Limiting the maximum number of people per session to 6. Limiting the use, as we just discussed with Councillor, around not allowing other uses to take place within that use class. And then there was also a suggestion of, should the business cease to operate, then it would have to revert back to being used as a garage for car parking only. Those are the ones that were put forward by Councillor Phipps.
And how workable are those additional conditions? So they're limiting the number of people down to 6 and reverting back. Is that stuff that's within the gift of the committee to do?
Well, it absolutely is within the gift of the committee, and that's exactly what I'm hoping you're going to go on to debate in due course. But yes, the short answer is members do have the scope to change conditions, add conditions if they see fit.
I'd be curious. I don't know if we can, but I would be very tempted to hear from the applicant on their view on these conditions, because what I wouldn't want us to do is to kill the business off by over-regulation. I'd like to hear how workable they feel things like the limiting to 6 and so forth would be. Is that something we can ask?
I don't think it's appropriate. We've heard the applicant that the average size is 5. Also, Mr. Waters has been in discussion with the applicant, and he said there's been no back-to-back, so it isn't full 12 hours a day. There are intervals between that. So we'll see how the discussion goes within the committee, and if we do feel we need more information, then we can decide if we want the applicant to engage. So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I'm being a bit pedantic, but can you tell me if no amplified music means no music at all, or would acceptable radios, for instance, be able to be used, because they don't necessarily have an amplifier?
So condition 3 does say that amplified music or music played. So it is music, no music.
Okay, and that would cover headphones as well, I guess.
Any other questions? Councillor Rice?
Well, just on that, we had the applicant say that there was soundproofing installed. So if there's if there's minimal music played and you can't hear it from outside, because we've heard there's air conditioning as well, I was assuming that that would be okay. Yeah. No, it's a question. Am I misunderstanding the requirements? That seems bizarre that there'd be no music whatsoever.
As we know that even with windows shut, music can get through. So I think if it's on the table that no music and the residents like that aspect, I think that's what we should be working with.
Well, I'm wondering if that is actually what we're seeing. Yeah, the fact that it puts
Waters?
amplified music, like.
Yeah, thank you. So the condition says, at no time during use of the building for business purposes shall amplified or other music be played, nor any public address systems be used in the premises hereby permitted. So that is the restriction. That's coming off the advice that came from the environmental health team. That is what they consider to be appropriate. Again, as members, you're entitled to take a view on that, but that's the advice that we received from our environmental health colleagues.
Okay, and obviously the applicant is aware of that and agreement.
Yeah, the applicant's aware.
Okay, just from me, Mr. Waters. So we understand the business has been running since November 24. Has there been any complaints from environmental health or from the parking team, from neighbours or the bus company? Thank you.
So I am not aware of any complaints from environmental health relating directly to this business. There have been other concerns that sit outside of the planning, this planning application, so I propose not to discuss them unless you particularly wish to, but and certainly nothing in relation to concerns from highways about parking.
Okay, thank you for that. So if there's no further questions, we'll go to debate. So Councillor Salmon, if you sort of started debate, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, we're meant to encourage economic development and activity according to the NPPF, aren't we? And it sits in where we say we should develop stuff. I like the additional condition to restrict it to a class, is it ED or something? I can't remember it, but restricted down to sports and leisure. I think if we could also add that it reverts back to non-business use once it's done. I think if we put that on as a condition, I like that. I'm a little reluctant to actually see us restrict the hours of opening or the number of people who can attend anymore. I think actually it's more key that it's just quiet. I think 4 people making a lot of noise is more annoying than 8 people making not very much noise. And I think actually that's covered already. I'm tended to recommend approval with the additional conditions around change of use and that reverting back. But I would be interested to hear what others think, because I'm not infallible.
Okay, so you're happy to hold off that recommendation for a few minutes? Okay, Councillor Pedwin.
Thank you. I'm very happy with the proposed change of condition that's arisen out of Councillor Gillett's question about restricting it to this particular use. But I've still got concerns about car parking and vehicle movements. We've heard the current situation, which all sounds pretty acceptable, but I think we've got to look at the possible worst case as the business possibly develops, gets more popular, more people wanting to come. So maximum class size of 8 at the moment, which could be up to 8 cars, 5 on the driveway, 3 on the road. That's fine. But as that class finishes and another class of 8 potentially arrives, that's another potential 8 cars. Now, we hear that some of the people come by on foot or cycle or bus, which is great. But I think we've got to be prepared for a worst case scenario where you've got a changeover of 16 people all in cars. And I think we've got to bear that in mind in any decision we come to.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Rice?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are that I support the application. I agree that it's in keeping with improving access to fitness provision within the community and reducing the need to travel. So it's ideal for people that live in that community. I don't have any concerns about car parking. The street has plenty, as we've heard from the officers, the expert view is that there is plenty of parking on street. And we've already heard that in reality, the classes at the moment are not back to back in general. I think being concerned about sort of worst case scenarios of parking is not a valid reason to, in terms of planning law, it doesn't appear that it's a valid reason to object to this proposal, as we've been advised. And I think if the business is doing that well, then there's obviously a demand from the community for it. And so we should be supporting it. And in reality, I imagine if that became an issue, then they would be looking at a different location to be able to expand it even further. I'm happy with the condition change for sports, the DE change. I'm happy to keep the hours as they are now as well. Yeah, I think in general, I just support more facilities for health and well-being within the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Slade?
Councillor Rice has said what I was going to say. I do know of several businesses on Herne Way and also Riverway that are work from home businesses, and they do have customers coming and going. So, and one of them is a dental removal in the cars, and the other is a home massage studio with frequent guests coming and going. I use the road a lot, both Herne Way and Riverway. I agree with both Councillor Rice and Councillor Salmon, but I do hear what the Vice Chair says as well.
Councillor Gillett?
I think just going back to the point of the usage, because I think within ED as well, you could have like children's parties or that type of thing as well. So there's also different sorts of noise. So my thought, although I like the idea of restricting it to ED, whether you could practically set something like a decibel count, so provided, because then that would restrict people from opening a window, and so it shouldn't, the noise outside the building shouldn't exceed 35 decibels or something like that. Because that, and I'm also a bit concerned about this idea of saying, oh, we'll in the future we'll have to revert to a garage, because in a sense what you're doing is you're almost pre-approving a planning application for something which you haven't actually seen what it's going to be. I mean, there could be all sorts of horrendous connotations as to what the garage might look like. So I just think we shouldn't really be approving things in the future. And I don't know whether I'm happy with ED, but I'm just a bit concerned about noise level, and I'm also a bit concerned about this idea of banning any amplified sound. Actually, that's within the building, yeah. So I mean, I don't know how you danced. I don't know. And the final point I did want to raise, that I think I did have a quick look at the timetable, and I think there are a few kind of back-to-back classes in the timetable, but there's very few classes, but there are a few which are back-to-back as well. So yes, my only thought was if we could say something about decibels, and then potentially say, well, you can have some music in there, probably it's not loud and it can't be heard too much outside the studio.
Thank you for that. I think the main distinction is between music for business use and music for personal use. So music for personal use of a resident applicant's family is allowed. It's just music for business isn't allowed, and that's set out. And I think from what I'm hearing, I think that people are make that clear, and the residents probably obviously clear distinction for business use.
So we're
no
saying
music
there's no music
for business
in the studio.
for business. But if a family want to use it outside of business, they can have music. And as Mr. Walters said, it would be like any other family using their property. If the music is too loud, then residents would contact environmental health, and it will be treated as a residential use like that. So there is that clear distinction.
I don't know much about this sort of business model, but is it not a business model that requires music to be played in the studio?
From what we've had, from Mr. Walters has said, had the discussion with the business. They don't need music.
They don't need music.
And so I held off, Councillor Salmon, with your recommendation. So if you want to come with a recommendation now.
So I would recommend that we approve this with the existing conditions on there, with the addition of one, that it is a specific ED business use that we're approving, and that would revert to having no business use approval at the end of the lifetime of the business. I think that's the additional condition we could have, isn't it? So yeah, that's what I'd like to approve. Approve with that condition.
No changes to time? Or
no
days
changes
or
to
anything?
times or the amount of people,
no. And Mr. Gould, could you come back on that term about reverting back?
Yeah, this obviously builds on what Councillor Phipps had put forward in her deputation. Again, if I've captured it correctly, what she was saying is that if the business use ceases, then the garage or the structure the use of it should revert back to being a garage, i.e. a domestic garage, as part of the overall planning unit. But she did go a little bit further and also say it should be also limited for the parking of cars only. And I would probably suggest to members that's probably a bit unreasonable. It's not uncommon these days for people to have a garage, but they don't park their cars in it because the car doesn't fit, or they just want to use that space for storage. So I think if members were inclined to want that space to revert back to being a domestic garage, I would probably say leave it at that. Don't go the extra step and put that limitation saying you've got to park a car.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want somebody to have to go out and buy a car that just sits in their garage because of a planning condition. That seems absurd.
So, Councillor Salmon, you're happy with
it just reverts back to being a normal domestic garage at the end of the life cycle of that.
You're
business.
proposing that. Councillor Rice, are you seconding?
No, I wanted clarification on that. So would any structural changes need to be done? Because obviously it's being used for family use as well. Yeah, what does that actually mean when the business stops? What actually physically needs to happen to that room?
There's no physical changes, it's just the use of it. So basically it goes back to being a space that is just used incidental to the enjoyment of the overall planning unit, which is the dwelling. Now, it might be that they want to put table that's in there for the kids or something like that. You know, but I think the point I was stressing is that Councillor Phipps was saying it should then only be used for the parking of cars. And that seems a little bit unfair, unreasonable to me.
Yeah, so the equivalent of saying that we're just stopping the business use.
Councillor Martin, are you seconding?
I've just got one or two reservations. Councillor Phipps and one of the objectors said about cutting down the number of sessions or cutting down the number of pupils. I'm thinking if there's no music in the room, then if somebody's having a lesson, they're having instructions shouted at them, and so that's in some ways worse than music, and I'm thinking 8 pupils, if you had fewer pupils, like if you limited it to 6, 5 or 6 pupils, the instructor doesn't have to raise their voice quite so much, because that can be more irritating than music. That's what I was thinking. And also 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, or it's quite a lot for the local people. I think it could be quite miserable living next door to that.
Okay, so Councillor Martin, if you wanted to put a condition to say 6 people, and also if you wanted to maybe a condition to say no Sundays and no bank holidays.
I definitely think no Sundays and no bank holidays, because that's some time when families need to relax at home, and perhaps just Saturday mornings, not Saturday afternoon, and not on Sundays, so that people can have some time to to relax.
Okay, and
Chair, can I just check? We have a move on the table. Can we have a seconder before we start discussing amendments, please?
Councillor Martin, are you? Would you propose that to Councillor Salmon, those additional conditions?
Additional conditions.
And then you would.
Yeah,
Would you
I'm reluctant about putting any further conditions. I think it's just too prescriptive. There's something that seems a little kind of insane in terms of red tape of going, oh, we can only have 5 people today, you know, for it just seems unworkable. I think limiting it to 8 people and the hours we've put on it seems fair enough. And to be honest, you can have a party in your garden on a Sunday afternoon and make a lot of noise. You know, it seems a bit too dystopian and prescriptive for me.
Okay, so do we have a seconder on?
You've got one over there.
I'll
Councillor Slade.
second Joe's as it was.
Right. Okay. So that's what's on the table. So as set out with the additional condition about restricting the use to ED. Councillor Rice, did you want to come back in? Okay. So it's clear what we've got.
So yeah, Chair. So just to clarify, there is now a move on the table from Councillor Salmon, which has been seconded. If anybody wants to move an amendment to that move, you can then have that discussion and take a vote on the amendment. That either then becomes a substantive motion or you revert back to the original move.
Thank you for clarifying that. So it is merely Councillor Martin.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy with 8 then. I agree with Councillor Salmon on the perhaps 8 pupils, but I still think that Saturdays, Sundays and weekends should be sacrosanct for, you know, for families living around the area. And I would like to see some restrictions, because like if you live there and you're thinking every Sunday you can't sit in your garden, it's just miserable. It's a miserable way to exist. And I just think it would be better to at least restrict, you know, use at weekends and bank holidays, perhaps Saturday afternoons only. Sundays, no Sundays, no bank holidays, so that people can relax in their own homes.
So it is just at the weekends. It is just for mornings.
Yes, for just weekends and bank holidays. To be
But no,
restricted.
currently, as set out, it is just the morning, Saturday and Sunday, which is allowed. And as I say, there's no noise coming from it. It's just the movement of people. How do others feel about what Councillor Martin's saying?
Because you've got car door slamming and things.
Councillor Gill.
Wouldn't it be great if you could, you know, nobody likes neighbours shouting. Wouldn't it be great if you said, well, the planning condition on this new house being built is that nobody's allowed to ever shout in it. You know, I think there's a question of essentially of reasonableness within all of it, and so I'm quite happy with what Joe was saying about having to amend it.
Because it's already 9 till 12 on Saturdays and Sundays, isn't it? Yeah. I tell you, I might have missed it actually at the time, but didn't you mention if it's a bank holiday Monday, would that be the 9 to 12 restriction, or would that be the weekday restriction for Monday?
It would be the weekday for Monday.
Shall we ask that it's maybe an amendment would be that on a bank holiday it is that same 9 to 12 restriction? I don't know. No, okay, we're getting we are too prescriptive now. I'll stick as is.
Okay, so we have a proposer and seconder as Mr. Gould. Do you want to come in?
Clarification about what
Yeah.
amendments we've now built in.
That's exactly what I was hoping to provide you, Councillor. So, having listened to the debate, and there's a move on the table, if I'm summarising it correctly, it's to grant the application subject to the conditions that are set out in the officer's report, but adding 2 new conditions, which one would be to limit the use to within use class ED, which deals specifically with indoor sport, recreation, fitness, and then adding a second condition which would be worded something along the lines that should the business use cease to operate, then the use of the structure shall revert back to being used only for purposes incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house. And finally, Chair, because we would need to work up those conditions, would you also, members, vote, give delegated power back to the head of planning operations to add those conditions, And I don't know whether you'd want to consider the wording of those to be approved by chair, vice chair, before the decision notice is issued. But I'll leave that for you to decide. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Salmon, you're happy?
Yeah,
with,
that's hit the nail
just
on the
del-
head.
delegate
And
to
I'm very
the-
happy to delegate to the head of planning and chair and vice chair to sign off on the exact wording.
And Councillor Slade, you're happy? Okay, so if there's no further debate, we know what the proposal with the conditions are. So if you're happy to approve that, if you show now, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And if you're against, show now.
None.
And if you're abstaining,
2.
okay, so that application is approved as set out with those minor condition added. So thank you for that, and just have a moment's break. Keep on. Yeah, so if we can pause and we'll have a 5-minute. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to the Planning Committee. So 6B is Southbourne Crossroads Car Park, and Mr. Kulik.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, thanks. Carry on.
Thank you. Just enlarge the presentation. Okay. So we've got this application relates to Southbourne Crossroad car park site, which is, and the application itself is section 73 variation of planning conditions related to the original permission granted by the planning inspector. In terms of the location of the site, we've got a former Southbourne Crossroads car park site, which is under construction right now. And the application site itself is adjacent to the Southbourne Cross roundabout, which links Southbourne Overcliff Drive with Southbourne Coast Road and South Catherine's Road. The site itself is on a cliff top, and towards the north of the site, we've got South Catherine's Terrace, which are terrace of residential houses. This is the site plan, so we can see a granted 4 blocks of residential flats. So we've got block A, B, C, D. On this site plan, we can see that the A, it's got brown roof, which in fact is a brown roofed as proposed under this application, and then rest of it is B, C, D, which removes both brown and green roofs to allow some PV panels, which will be discussed further later in this presentation. In terms of the application side and related planning history. So this application, just to avoid confusion, this application relates to Appeal A. And so the Appeal A granted by the planning inspector on the 3rd of March 2023 was also basically also relates to the same decision notice which granted another appeal decision, Appeal B. With Appeal A, which is which relates to the current revision, we've got granted 4 blocks of flats with 27 flats, and obviously associated bin, cycle store, and cycle, as well as car parking spaces. So in terms of the current application, so some conditions suggested by an inspector will be either amended or complied with. So we've got condition 2, which related to approved plans. So some of those changes related on the current application relates mainly to design of external features like external facing materials, as well as some landscaping revisions. And then we've got condition 4, which basically adds additional land stability report to the current to the original permission. So inspector found that the submitted slope stability report with the original permission was acceptable. And so this on the current application, we've got additional report which adds further measurements to protect the site and obviously nearby residential houses. And then we've got condition 5, which is more specialized condition which relates to contamination. So it was consulted with the environmental health officer specializing in contamination, plus our external consultee which specialize in contamination consultation. So this proposal would amend slightly the condition requirement, plus the 3 phases related to contamination condition, which basically applicant need to comply with. So we've got 2 phases approved right now, and there's still remaining 3rd phase, which is acceptable in environmental health officer requirements. So again, the condition 5 has been satisfied. Then condition 7 related to schedule or materials. So on the current application, we've got revisions to external facing materials, which are basically the main, I would say, amendment to the approved scheme, which caused loads of objections, and this will be discussed further in this presentation. Condition 8 relates to soft landscaping requirements. So on the current application, the applicant provided landscaping maintenance plan, landscaping related plans, suggestions. All of that was consulted with the council's tree officer specializing in landscaping and obviously tree matters, and this was found to be acceptable. Then condition 9 relates to, again, more specialized requirement which relates to drainage and flooding, and the suggested revisions were found acceptable by the consulted local lead flooding authority. So just to show, one of my first site visits was on the 15th of January, and we can see the site was cleared. Then on another site visit, which was on 11th of April, we can see that construction work started, and that was related to this was basically follow-up of discharge of prior commencement conditions associated with the original commission. And as far as I'm aware, construction works are still going on site right now, and so the site it's under construction as confirmed before. Just to compare what's the changes would be, so I just want to emphasize that the footprint, scale, massing of the scheme, it's almost identical to this which was previously approved. So mainly in terms of visual impact, changes related to external facing materials to simplify design, and obviously that's related with saving some construction cost related to this site. So we've got Appeal A on the top drawing, and the third plan shows it's proposed right now. So we can see it's a simplified design. However, we did try to secure some external facing materials which will be a quality one, plus to mix this up with in terms of stacking bricks, and obviously making some small changes to those elevations. And I just want to say, most of those, I mean, those changes to elevations relates to rear facing elevations, so front and side elevations won't be affected by this application. Again, we've got block B, so the bottom drawing shows changes to the original permission, which is Appeal A on the top, which is the top drawing. And then we've got block C and D changes, so we can see D on D elevation shows kind of like a mixture of Appeal B and A, but the scale of this block will match Appeal A decision. So in terms of proposed materials, so all of those been listed within the officer's report, and also myself and our urban design officer visited the site and discussed some of those sample of materials on site with the applicant and developer. Just to show the street scenes again, I just want to highlight the fact that front elevation won't be affected, so it's exactly the same as granted by the planning inspector. However, changes related to external facing materials will be along the rear elevation walls. Just to quickly run through soft landscaping scheme, again, all of that was discussed with our landscape officer. However, because it's an appeal decision, we had like limited options in terms of providing the best soft landscape on site, because the site is I mean it's basically built probably to maximum scale, and we can't really do much in terms of soft landscaping. Hard surfacing also was secured, and all of those details were discussed with officers. That's one of the final site plans showing the floor plans, such as also in terms of highway, there are no changes to approved cycle and park and car parking provision, and the number of units won't change, so it's exactly the same as originally approved by the planning inspector. So just to summarize, it is officers' view that all those changes are not material, are minor in scale, and won't be detrimental to the original permission in terms of visual impact on neighbours, or highway and safety and parking provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kulik. So if we now move to speakers.
Thank you. So there are no speakers registered in objection. Chris Meal is here to speak on behalf of the applicant, if you'd like to come forward.
Good morning, members. My name is Chris Mill and I'm an Associate Director at Pure Town Planning, and I'm here speaking in support of the proposal on behalf of the applicant. I'm an RTPI Chartered Town Planner with over 10 years of experience, which includes a 2-year period working as a planning inspector. The application is before you today following a call-in request from Councillor De Novo, who has expressed concerns that the original application has had a detrimental effect on the local area, and thus she supports local residents who are opposed to this proposal. I wish to use my time today to respond to the negative comments that have been received and explain why I feel that members should support the officer's recommendation to grant permission for this amendment. As you've heard, the site benefits from extant planning permission for the erection of 4 blocks of flats, which will provide 27 units and 29 undercroft car parking spaces. This is referred to as Appeal A. The development was approved at appeal in 2023 following a committee overturn of the officer's recommendation to grant permission. In allowing that appeal, the inspector found that the council had acted unreasonably in refusing consent, and he awarded costs to the appellant, which equated to over £20,000 being paid out by BCP Council. The inspector's decision must be given significant weight by members when assessing the current proposal. In assessing the appeal proposals, the inspector found that the development, and I quote, would deliver a marked enhancement, improving the physical and visual quality of the street scene and helping to better link the site with the rest of the seafront. This finding remains relevant with the proposal before you today. The development has now lawfully commenced its site, and the applicant wishes to make minor amendments to the approved plans to improve the overall quality and energy efficiency of the residential apartments and the external appearance of the respective flatted blocks. The amendments do not alter the approved unit mix or parking requirements for the development. In addition, no changes are sought regarding the agreed planning obligations, which includes payments towards affordable housing, a replacement bus shelter and a new zebra crossing. Externally, the revised design has been informed by the material palette of the approved plans linked to Appeal B, which is similar to what was approved at appeal in 2023. The revised proposals maintain a high quality design approach at the site, which has been finalised during the application process through collaborative discussions with the Council's Urban Design Officer and Planning Officer, both of whom I would like to thank for their hard work on this application. In addition to the external changes, the internal layout of the development has been revised to provide additional study rooms for many of the units in a response to a growing demand for home working, which ensures that the development will cater for the needs of future residents and also reduce the need to travel and the subsequent vehicle emissions. Finally, the proposal makes changes to the landscaping strategy at the site to bolster the site's sustainability. The previously approved green roofs are to be removed to allow for the installation of a substantial number of solar panels, which will provide a clean source of renewable energy at the site. To mitigate the loss of this green feature, the revised plans incorporate a living wall that will be installed along the site frontage of the overcliff. The full specification of this feature has been provided to the council, and it includes a planting schedule that is suitable over the long term in this seafront location. The living wall will be highly visible from the public realm and represents an enhancement to the scheme when compared to the green roofs that would have been largely hidden from public view. Members, to conclude, this application has been thoroughly assessed by your officer, who has concluded in his report that the proposed changes do not result in any detrimental impacts over the approved scheme, and that the scheme would not be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and it will not have a materially harmful impact on neighbouring residents. I share these views. Therefore, I hope you agree with your officer's recommendation to grant permission and vote in favour of the proposal today. Thank you for your time.
And we also have Ward Councillor, Councillor Bernadette Nanovo.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Bernadette Nanovo and I represent East Southbourne and Tuckton Ward. And I'm here today on behalf of residents of Southbourne. I called this amendment in because residents don't trust the system. They wanted this application publicly scrutinised, as the original decision to grant planning permission for this development was taken behind closed doors at the Planning Inspectorate. There was a considerable number of objections to the original planning application, which is why this amendment has caused more of a stir than it might otherwise have. On this amendment, there were 82 objections on the planning portal, but not all of them were local. The outrage is not about this amendment so much as the fact that residents were disregarded on the original application, and a plan was agreed by the Planning Inspectorate, and now that plan has been changed. They don't know what to expect from one day to the next. From the time of the first planning application, more land has been added to this site and paths cleared around the development until not one blade of grass was left in a place that used to be lush and overgrown and a haven of wildlife. You can see that from the photographs taken in January. There was no greenery to be seen whatsoever. The main concern of residents in St. Catherine's Terrace with this amendment is that it will make the back of the building that they look out onto very plain, and using the words of one resident, dismal. And additional rooms will mean more residents and added pressure on parking, which has been extremely problematic since the car park has been taken away. Another reason for the mistrust of residents is that an additional piece of land that residents thought would remain a public amenity green space has now been transferred or is being transferred. I'm checking out the exact status to the developer and will be the site of the sales office, which is under a different planning application. This has meant that development is being extended even further. And for a time, a public right-of-way was closed up until residents complained. Without their vigilance, they could have lost a valuable pathway from their homes to the coast road. I know the Planning Committee must consider the application that is in front of them and not anything that has gone before. But I believe that residents can now be assured that this application is being fully scrutinised, and they can watch this recording later and know that you've all analysed the situation. And if the decision is to grant it today, then it will be in a public forum. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Mr. Kulik, is there anything you wanted to come back on to from what you've heard from the speakers?
Not really. Apart from that, I just want to make sure we're clear on the principle of the proposed works which were approved by the planning inspector. So we've got similar scale, massing, and even the footprint is identical almost to the approved scheme. So I just want to make sure we're all aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. So open to members. Councillor Salmon.
So I've got a few questions. So the green roofs, losing those. So if you compared this application and the fallback application, am I right in thinking there's a significant biodiversity loss in this application compared to the fallback?
Mr. Kulik?
It depends, because biodiversity net gain legislation wasn't adopted at the time when the application was granted. So inspectors suggested pretty standard landscaping condition, which part of this condition required both brown and green roofs, and it wasn't like clear justification, biodiversity justification for that. So the change with the current application is that we only have one brown roof, no green roofs, but then we have loads of PV panels which were not which didn't form part of the original scheme. So technically, with more PV panels which are part of the building control regulations right now, we're technically improving the sustainability of the scheme as such. Obviously, we have less space for diversity, but then it's more sustainable schemes. So that's the balance with this application.
Okay, and then just the living wall thing. Were there any concerns raised about the viability of that, and are there any additional conditions we could maybe impose there?
I mean, there were some concerns raised by both urban design and our tree officer in terms of how expensive it will be to maintain this living wall, and is actually the best location for that. But we've got assurance from the applicant and their agents and consultant they can actually maintain the green wall, and they obviously all that cost will be on obviously on them, and they will basically cover any maintenance issues with this green wall.
Can we put a condition on with reference to that green wall? So something.
Yeah, we can do that. We can say something between the lines. The approved green wall need to be maintained for, I don't know, 10, 20 years, and any different approach or removal of this green wall need to be first approved by the local authority in writing.
Okay, and I'll tell you what, this will be my last one then. So there was a path between the two of the blocks before, and we've lost that. Does the loss of that path conflict with any of our local plan policies?
So we're talking about block A and B, I believe. So just to quickly analyze the approved appeal decision. So on appeal A, there was path between A and B block. Then there was no path on appeal B. Revisions to shown or amendments to the scheme which form part of the appeal scheme removed actually this footpath on appeal A scheme, which is the current application. So inspector said actually there is no reason to actually require that. Plus, I believe there was some conflict with the third party and public rights of way, maybe. But long story short, inspector has agreed that there is no need for that, and there won't be any conflict with related planning policy.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Slade.
It's been answered from Joe's question.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No, so we go into debate then. If anyone wants to chip in. Just from my perspective, I think it needs to be clear that the scale isn't changing, the number of flats isn't changing. It is just really, as we've seen those 5 or so conditions, it seems to be the materials. So yes, I can understand the people in behind might see, whilst they see a bit more colour, they might see a bit more grey. And similarly, I think the other aspects of the conditions seem to be on requirements for water and stability, and they seem to all make sense. So on the face of it, I can't see any reasons to refuse. Councillor Slade?
I agree with those points, and I respect why Councillor Novo's brought it in. I know the residents aren't happy with it, but on the basis of agreeing with what you've just said, I'd just like to move that we recommend this and go to the vote to approve it.
And Councillor Slade, so on that point about the potential condition for a green wall and the words Mr. Cooley, would you want to add that in as well?
In terms of
condition, a concern of mine, no. I'm open to it. If Joe wants to put it in, if I'm not going to get the votes, but it's not my concern, so no. Agreed as it is.
Okay. So
subject to the section 106 agreement as well.
So propose as set out. any seconder for that? Councillor Williams, and again, did you want an aspect about the green wall?
I don't have a problem, as councillor stated, as is.
Okay, so is there any other debate? Councillor Salmon.
Yeah, I would like to propose an amendment that we do put a condition for, I think the officer mentioned 20 years maintenance of the living wall. Let's go for that. So yeah, they've got to maintain that for 20 years, and if more than a certain percentage of those kind of die off, they've got to replant those. And I wonder if we can do the same on the brown roofs, where again, if those fail, you know, if they're not suitable for the area that the applicant, they take care of replanting those as well. Those are 2 additional conditions I'd like on there. I don't know if that's practical.
Thank you for seconding, Councillor Gillett. Mr. Gould, do they sound reasonable?
Yes, Chair, in principle. I don't know if I'm allowed, but a question almost back to Piotr. I don't know whether we have details submitted already in respect of the brown roofs and green walls, but if not, then it is entirely again within the gift of the committee to add such a condition, wording along the lines of details in respect of the brown roofs green wall to be submitted to the local planning authority to be approved in writing. And then normally we would use stock wording along the lines of and thereafter to be maintained and retained thereafter. That would obviously be for the lifetime of the development, not just 20 years. But it's within the gift of members to limit it to 20 years. But we would normally use wording along the lines of thereafter maintained and retained thereafter.
Yeah, if we can make it longer than 20 years, brilliant. If they can look after it until the end of time, cracking.
Okay, Councillor Gillett.
My only thought with that would be how enforceable it would be if you just put on an unlimited basis, and also the essentially what is the scope of that, you know, essentially if all the plants have died off, is it still a living wall, you know, in terms of that?
Mr. Gould.
Yeah, what we would be requesting is a report that would set out how they're going to implement the green wall, the brown roof, and that would also then have sections in it that would cover issues like if plants die, then, you know, new plants would be added within a certain time. Maybe there would be some comment in there also about the timing of the year, you know, when you would add them. But that's what that report would cover off, exactly how you're going to maintain and retain those features thereafter. And of course, if they don't adhere to that approved document, then it's potentially open to enforcement.
Okay, so Councillor Slade and Councillor Williams, are you happy to now incorporate that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just the usual little speech about obviously if members are going to vote to support the application with the addition of this extra condition, can you please give delegated authority back to the head of planning operations for us to word up that condition and add it to the decision notice, please?
Okay with that, yeah.
Sorry, my mistake. I missed that was already a condition.
Chair, you might just want to go back to Piotr because he'll be closer to the scheme, but that might set out what should be provided, but I'm not seeing anything there that might also talk about maintenance, unless I'm, you know, because I'm and you know, retention thereafter.
Mr. Kulik.
Yes, apologies. So I'm just literally reviewing the conditions, but as far as I'm aware, we've got listed plans, but we might actually note maintenance plan which was suggested by the applicant, but then there might be need for condition, notwithstanding with the approved details, we would require, let's say, ongoing maintenance of those features. But this will be condition 7, I believe, or 8.
8.
So we've got
8 is
landscaping
but it doesn't include the
landscaping scheme, but I'm not sure that, no, there's no reference to the maintenance plan as such. That it was submitted as a part of this application, but there's no reference to that, so it might be worth to add that actually.
Thank you for confirming that. So, yeah, I think if Councillor Williams and Slade, if we add the condition just to cover the maintenance as set out by Mr. Gould, you're happy with that? So any further debate? No. So the proposal is as set out with the additional condition about the maintenance and aspects for the living wall and the green roof, and also for delegated powers to the head of planning to agree those terms. Okay, so if you're happy with that, if you want to approve, show now, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's unanimous.
Okay, so that application is approved. Thank you. And that is the last item on the agenda, so the meeting is now closed. Thank you.